The candles on my dining room table flickered as my father's voice sliced through the room. You and your kid are just freeloaders. The words hung there, suspended in the warm air between the roast chicken I'd spent 3 hours preparing and the wine I'd uncorked to make this family dinner feel civilized. My mother sat across from me, and instead of flinching, instead of defending her only daughter and grandson, she smiled. Actually smiled. Then nodded slowly, like he'd finally said what she'd been thinking all along. Something strange happened to my hearing. The grandfather clock in the corner, the one I'd inherited from my grandmother, ticked louder than my father's voice. I became hyper-aware of the condensation sliding down my water glass, the pattern of the tablecloth threads beneath my fingernails as I gripped the fabric. They were sitting in my house, eating food I'd bought, at a table I owned, in a home I paid for every single month, and they had just called us freeloaders. My name is Nora. I'm 36, and I'm a product manager in Louisville, Kentucky. This is the story of how I stopped being my family's ATM and started being my own person. I looked at my mother, then my father, then my brother Owen, who sat at the end of the table with that familiar smirk. The same smirk he'd worn 18 years ago when my parents handed him my grandfather's inheritance check. "Say that again," I said quietly. My father's chin lifted. "You heard me. Living off our sacrifices. Acting like you're better than everyone." I set down my fork with deliberate precision. The clink against the plate seemed to echo. "Your sacrifices," I repeated, "in my house that you've been living in rent-free for 8 months. Here's what you need to understand. 3 years ago, I bought this 3-bedroom house in a quiet Louisville suburb. I'd earned every cent of the down payment through 15 years of grinding, working jobs that left my feet aching and my eyes burning, putting myself through college when my parents wouldn't contribute a dime. I'd built a career in tech that let me provide a good life for my son Dylan. And when my parents called last year, voices trembling with practiced desperation, telling me they'd lost everything after my father's latest business venture collapsed, I made the mistake of saying yes. Move in. We'll figure it out. Because despite everything they'd done to me, some part of me still wanted to believe family meant something. That belief died at my dinner table that night. My father's face reddened. "We raised you. Everything you have, you owe to us." I almost laughed. "You raised me until I was 18. Then you took the $100,000 Grandpa left me and handed it to Owen for his construction business." Owen shifted in his seat. The smirk flickered. "That was different," my mother said smoothly. "That was an investment in the family's future." The business failed in 11 months. I kept my voice level. "And when I needed money for college, you told me to take out loans. When I worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over my head, you never called. Not once." My father slammed his palm on the table. The candle flames danced. "You always had to play the victim. We did what was best for this family." "This family." I gestured around the room. "You mean the family sitting in my house, eating my food, while you call my 12-year-old son a freeloader?" Silence, heavy and absolute. My mother's smile had frozen. Owen stared at his plate. My father's jaw worked, but nothing came out. I pushed back my chair and stood. "Dinner's over." I walked out of my own dining room, my hands steady even though my heart hammered against my ribs. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice rise in indignation, my father's growled response. But I didn't stop. I climbed the stairs to Dylan's room where he was doing homework with his headphones on, blessedly unaware of the ugliness downstairs. I watched him for a moment, this kid who laughed at my terrible jokes and dreamed of being an astronaut and trusted me completely. He was the reason I'd survived those early years, the reason I kept fighting. He wasn't a freeloader. He was my entire world. That night, after my parents had retreated to the guest room in stiff silence and Owen had driven away without a word, I called my best friend Delia. She'd been my financial advisor for 5 years and the closest thing to a sister I'd ever had. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice sharp with concern. I told her. The dinner, the accusation, the way my mother had nodded in agreement. Delia was quiet for a long moment. "Nora, you've been supporting these people for almost a year, paying their bills, buying their groceries, giving them a place to live, and they called you a freeloader?" in my own house. Okay. Her tone shifted to the focused, practical Delia I relied on. What do you want to do? I stared at the ceiling, thinking about 18 years of distance, thinking about the inheritance that could have changed my life, the college years I'd scraped through alone, the silence when I needed support most. I want them out, I said, but I want to do it right. What happened next took patience. My parents didn't make it easy. 2 days after the dinner, my father announced he'd been experiencing chest pains. My mother called me at work, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. The doctors say he needs rest, stability. We can't possibly move now. I got him an appointment with a cardiologist. The diagnosis, mild arrhythmia, manageable with medication, not the emergency my mother had implied. Then came the money requests. Owen had a new opportunity, a real estate deal that was guaranteed to pay off. They just needed $40,000 to get started. When I said no, my mother's texts turned cold. After everything we've sacrificed for you. I saved every message. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. My coworker forwarded me a link with a short message. Is this your mom? It was a video on social media. My mother, tears streaking her carefully made-up face, clutching a tissue. My daughter abandoned us, she sobbed. She has all this money, a big fancy job, but she won't help her own parents keep a roof over their heads. She's turned her back on her own blood. The video had 12,000 views. The comments were brutal, heartless. Some people don't deserve families. I hope she sees this and feels ashamed. My hands shook as I watched it again. She'd filmed this in my house, in the guest room I'd given them, while eating food I'd bought. I called Delia. I need a lawyer. Within a week, I had a plan. My parents thought they were in a position of power, living in my home, making demands, playing the victim online. They didn't realize I'd been documenting everything for months. The unanswered requests for them to contribute to household expenses, the records of every dollar I'd spent supporting them, the screenshots of my mother's social media performance. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Miranda, drafted 2 documents. The first was a formal eviction notice, giving them 30 days to vacate. The second was a cease and desist letter demanding my mother remove all defamatory content and refrain from further public statements about me. You're sure about this? Miranda asked, sliding the papers across her desk. I thought about Dylan, about the look on his face when he'd asked why Grandpa seemed so angry all the time, about 18 years of trying to earn approval from people who'd never given it freely. I'm sure. The notice was served on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't there, but Miranda told me about it afterward. My father had turned purple with rage. My mother had wept, then demanded to speak to me. Owen, who happened to be visiting, had stood in the corner looking pale. My phone exploded with calls and texts. I let them all go to voicemail. You're destroying this family, my mother's message said, her voice thick with manufactured grief. How can you do this to your own parents? My father's message was shorter. You'll regret this. Owen sent a single text. You've always been cold. I didn't respond to any of them. The 30 days were chaos. My mother made 3 more videos, each one more dramatic than the last. Miranda sent cease and desist letters for each one. When my mother ignored them, we filed a defamation suit. My father tried a different approach. He called my ex-husband Travis, Dylan's father, trying to turn him against me. Travis, to his credit, shut it down immediately and called to warn me. Your dad's saying you've lost your mind, Travis said, his voice carrying a hint of respect I hadn't heard in years. Told him to lose my number. Thanks, I said, genuinely surprised. Nora, he paused. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Those people never treated you fairly. It was a strange moment of solidarity with the man who'd cheated on me, but I'd take allies where I could find them. The eviction deadline arrived on a gray November morning. My parents had found an apartment across town, a small 2-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades. Owen would be staying with them, another failed venture added to his resume. I came home from work that evening to find the house empty, not just of my parents, but of several items that weren't theirs. My grandmother's silverware, a painting that had hung in my living room for years, some of Dylan's video games. I documented everything with photos and added it to Miranda's file. The missing items were included in our settlement demands. My parents returned most of them, though the painting remained conveniently lost. 2 weeks later, my mother's social media accounts went silent. The defamation suit had gotten her attention. Through Miranda, they agreed to a settlement, public retraction, removal of all videos, and a promise to cease further statements. In exchange, I dropped the suit. It wasn't about winning money. It was about making them stop. The holidays that year were quiet. Just Dylan and me, with Delia joining us for Christmas dinner. We ate too much, watched movies Dylan picked, and fell asleep on the couch during the third one. "Mom?" Dylan asked sleepily as I carried him to bed. "Yeah, buddy. Are you sad about Grandma and Grandpa?" I tucked the blankets around him, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes. But I'm not sad about us. We're going to be okay." He nodded, already half asleep. "I like when it's just us." I kissed his forehead. "Me too." Months passed. I threw myself into work, earning a promotion that came with a team of my own to manage. Dylan joined the robotics club at school and started talking about engineering instead of just astronauts. Our weekends settled into a rhythm of soccer games, homework help, and pizza nights. I heard about my parents occasionally through mutual acquaintances. My father's health had stabilized. My mother was working at a grocery store, something she'd considered beneath her for her entire life. Owen was still chasing his next big break. None of them reached out. Neither did I. One evening, driving home from work, I took a detour past my old neighborhood, past the house I'd grown up in, the one my parents had lost to foreclosure years before their latest crisis. A young family lived there now. I could see their Christmas lights going up early, kids' bikes scattered across the lawn. I didn't feel nostalgic. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. That night, I found Dylan at the kitchen table, working on a robotics project that involved way more wires than I understood. "Need help?" I asked. He grinned. "You can hand me tools." So I did, passing screwdrivers and wire strippers while he explained concepts I only half followed. His enthusiasm was contagious. His confidence something I'd worked hard to nurture. This was what family looked like, not guilt or obligation or sacrifice tallied up for later ammunition, just showing up for each other day after day. My mother had asked me once, during one of our final confrontations, why I couldn't just accept things the way they were, why I had to make everything difficult, why I couldn't be grateful. The answer was simple, even if she'd never understand it. I wasn't grateful for what they'd given me. I was grateful for what they'd taught me, without meaning to, about who I didn't want to be, about the kind of parent I wanted to become. Dylan finished his project and held it up triumphantly, a small robot that rolled forward when he pressed a button. "It works!" he shouted. I pulled him into a hug. "Of course it does. You build it." He beamed up at me. This kid who would never doubt whether he was wanted, who would never feel like a burden, who would grow up knowing that love wasn't something you had to earn. That was my revenge. Not the eviction, not the lawsuit, not watching my parents scramble to rebuild lives they'd sabotaged with their own greed. My revenge was Dylan's smile. My revenge was the life we'd built together. My revenge was being happy. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.